Please join me in welcoming to the stage Natalia Dyer. I wanted to talk a little bit about when you first came into the role. Do you remember what scene it was that you first auditioned with and what it was that you were most excited by from the character from those first pages that you read?
The initial audition, we didn't have a full script. They were just sides, just scenes. And I think at that time, it was different. So there was like a scene, Nancy had a scene with her brother where she was just like really annoyed. And then there was a scene with Jonathan that ended up being very similar to the scene where they're in Nancy's bedroom after having gone to the Upside Down. But yeah, I didn't know much about it or about her. But then when we finally got to read the original episode, I mean, it's written so well, and it really just takes you on a journey. So it was really just the whole adventure of it, the whole suspense of reading this, this story. Yeah.
Did you have any hesitations in taking the role? Because obviously signing on for television, you might be doing something for several years, or was it a very easy part to say yes to?
By the time I was saying yes, it was a very, very easy thing to say yes to, just because, I mean, again, the story was great, the character was interesting, and the brothers were just so fun and lovely and easygoing. And just, I was ready for it. I was ready for whatever adventure it was going to be.
Yeah. What was some of your process prior to season 1 in terms of the backstory and research that you wanted to do for yourself before walking onto set that first time?
Well, I mean, getting more acquainted with the time period. Having been born in the 90s, didn't know as much about the 80s then. The brothers gave me research, seeing some of those classic 80s horror movies. I think specifically they wanted me to watch Nightmare on Elm Street. Because, Nancy was kind of the Nancy, and it kind of inspired this Nancy. And then they had me do, they asked if I wanted to maybe write a journal for Nancy, like the props person, wanted to fill this journal. So I did some journaling, which was quite helpful actually. And then, I think music, I had lots of Nancy playlist at first. I even, I like, one thing I like to do with characters is have a scent for them. So I looked up what perfumes might have been popular with teenage girls at the time, and there was this one called Charlie. And is it? And for my first scene that I was filming was the one with Nancy and Steve in her bedroom, and I tested it the night before, and I was like, oh no, I can't do this to Joe, poor Joe. It was so strong. So that kind of went out the window a little bit, but the intention was there. But yeah, that just those kind of you can only prepare so much before you actually get there and you're in the environment to explore with the other people and collaborate. But it was fun. It was a fun, just trying to figure her out.
Yeah. And how has that shifted now that you're going into season 3? Obviously, this is a character that you know very well. You know who she is. So what does that research process and creation for you look like now?
Now I feel, very close to having, been her for 3 years. I think a lot of it comes down to talking with the brothers and just, when we get those first scripts and kind of see, because there's always a time jump. So you're like, okay, what has happened since we left them? What has her life been? What has she been doing? What's her relationships like in this time? So it's I think now it's a lot more conversations. It's conversations with the hair people and the makeup people and the wardrobe. Who are all fantastic and do such a good job of helping all of us find our characters. But yeah, it feels a lot easier. It doesn't, it feels quite natural. And, I think we all feel more comfortable to have input of crafting it together, so that when you start filming, you're like, okay, I know where she's been. I know what she's been doing, which is, it's fun.
And obviously at this point they're writing for you, knowing your strengths, knowing your abilities, knowing the way that you play her. Are there different things that you've been able to advocate for her, either storyline wise or kind of what you see, where you see her personality going within the story?
Yeah, I think there are certain things. I mean, I do trust the brothers a lot. Like they've given her a lot of things that I never could have, dreamed up. But I think, I mean, I'll throw things at the brothers, kind of like half joking, but like I'll say it enough that like I'm like maybe they'll actually write it in. Like I feel like Nancy and Murray should team up. I think that'd be fun. But I think it comes down more to like the actual within the scenes. I know in this season in particular, Charlie, who plays Jonathan, and I worked together for most of the season, and there, it was really nice to get to explore what their relationship looks like outside of, fighting monsters. And we were quite, because it's such an ensemble cast, you only get so many scenes and so much dialogue that, you really want to like make it count. So there's a lot of conversations about what we felt like the integrity of those scenes, and like, with Nancy, like what things that I think she would say or wouldn't say, at this point. And the good thing is they're very open to conversations about it. They'll explain their reasonings for it or what they need to get out of a scene, and we usually find some kind of a compromise that feels right. They're lovely to work with, truly.
What's the kind of overall tone and environment that they like to create for all of you on set?
It's great. It's like the best, honestly, the best set I have worked on, could hope for. Everyone feels very, now we feel comfortable with each other. So it's like, going back to summer camp almost every year. But from the get-go, it was just really nice. And the brothers are funny. They're very particular people, but they're really nice and chill. Their notes are usually just like great, or like, just do it again, but don't be weird. So you kind of have to learn how to interpret their style. But yeah, it's really fun. And when you get to be on like the more supernatural side of things, that's always kind of wild and exciting. Like those days that you shoot with, like the hospital days for us this season were very exciting. I mean, they're technical and they're really long days, but it's such a fun world to be in. Yeah.
And that scene in particular was shot over several days, I believe. What was some of the hardest mechanics of that in terms of putting it together from the technical side? With the fight sequence, we have rehearsals, and then you have doubles for the more intense things. Also with a lot of it, there's CGI, and when you have CGI, you have to shoot the same thing so many times. You'll have, it was great. This, for our monster in the hospital, we had this guy, I think there's some footage of it online somewhere. This like wonderful movement actor in the silliest costume, because he had to wear like this big silver ball on his head for the CGI to work. But it was, it was very late, and it was just very almost hilarious to watch. But yeah, they're just long. There's so many technical things, so many setups. Also, the lights are flickering constantly, which really after a while gives you a bit of a headache. But it's it's one of those things that you do and it's really tiring, but then you look back and you're like, oh, it turned out amazing, and you forget all about the lack of sleep and all of that. Yeah. And it seems like in this season especially, they've given your character a lot more physical challenges, and there's a lot more stunt work involved. Have you started to reach a point where you're more comfortable with some of the stunt work, and maybe there's things that you do that you would have had a stunt person step in for previously?
Well, it's hard, because the more that they write those things, the more I'm like, oh, like, yes, like I want to do that. Like, yes, I'm game. Let's do it. But there's always, there's so much liability involved with using like your actual actors for some of the things that they're not always willing to. But I try, I think whenever a stunt comes up, I'm always just like, I am here. Like, I'll put the wires on, just set me up. But maybe next season they'll start to let me do a little bit more. I mean, a lot of it was they did let us do some of the just more obvious stuff. But, you know, flying into walls was not, it didn't let me do that part. But yeah, it's fun. It's really, I love those exciting kind of action-y scenes. I haven't really done as much of that in my past, so it's something that's just different and challenging.
Yeah. And how much do you know up front of what the CGI world is going to look like? Obviously, at this point, you know what all the Demogorgons look like, but at the beginning, did you know what that was going to look like visually on screen at all for your performance?
So the first season, I mean, they let us see some artwork. You know, they have people kind of drawing things like, this is kind of what it's going to look like. And you're like, oh yeah, that's scary. And the first season, we actually had a guy in the Demogorgon suit, like this guy in this, big Demogorgon suit. I don't know of another word for it. And he was great. You know, I think they wanted initially to do everything as practical as possible. And, you know, I think season 1 was a little more, a little easier in terms of what they'd written. But of course, every year it gets more and more and more. So they start to rely more on CGI. And we have access to, you know, the storyboards and kind of, you know, if you ask to see what things will look like, you know, they can kind of show you. But yeah, at the end of the day, you never really know. Most of the time when you watch it back with everything in, you're just like, oh, if I known it was going to look like that, like I would have, like, really, you know. But it's interesting. It's like another part of that collaboration of you do something and then somebody does something on top of that, and you all just, you know, piece it together to try to make this cool thing to share with the world.
And because it's a show with such a very specific visual look, are you someone that finds that elements like Nancy's hair and the great costumes that you get to wear really help you in terms of finding your character and stepping back into her each season?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think there's something definitely about period sort of settings where, you know, you can feel very transported just through, like a hair that feels very different or clothes that feel very different from you. I mean, increasingly sometimes I'm like, well, am I dressing more like Nancy or is she dressing more like me? There's like a little bit of a blur. But, you know, even like the sets are always incredible and meticulous. And, you know, if there's scenes with lots of extras and everybody's decked out, it does really kind of distinguish your, you know, the modern day from where you are now, and it kind of helps you get into that world for sure.
Yeah. And one of the scenes in particular where they had a very specific location is all of the scenes in the mall that they actually built out of an old one and decked it out to look like an 80s mall, which is amazing. Did that really help for all of you in terms of just immersing yourself within the space for the several days that you were shooting there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was really, that mall was incredible. Like the art department, I mean, every single store was just filled with things that were, you know, period appropriate. There's, I mean, you know, anything like that can help an actor get out of their head and into the space, like practical, you know, effects. It's always going to be helpful. And in this particular instance, I think, you know, I grew up with malls, not quite like Starcourt, but it's a similar vibe that I don't see anymore. It's very transporting. And I feel like every day we went to the set and we would just walk around and be like, this is wild. This is like, well done, you guys. This is so good.
And kind of similarly, shooting down in Georgia as opposed to being somewhere near where you live on a studio setting, does that really help in terms of the camaraderie and the chemistry that you guys are all building because you're so immersed in that space with just each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, you know, when you're filming on a location away from where you live and you're all in the space together that, you know, is new to you, it creates a little bit of a bubble for us that we can kind of, you know, slows us down. Like we can really, you know, be there and focus on the time there and the people there. And I do think it creates a really good environment. I very much look forward to, I mean, I'm from the South, so a little bit of it is familiar, but, I definitely look forward to just that kind of pace. I mean, I love New York and I love to live here, but it's nice to have that balance. And I think it really does help with the work and just the mental space for creating with other people.
Yeah. And do you find for yourself as a performer that you have a specific way that you like to stay between scenes, between takes? Do you like to stay in the character and kind of keep the mood and the tone and the emotional state that you're in for that scene? Or do you find it easier to step away and then come back into it for a new take?
I think it really depends on the scene. I think for scenes that are emotional, where you really kind of have to stay in a place of like this heavy feeling, it's hard to like go off set. And if they're changing, there's usually 5 to 10 minutes sometimes where you're sitting there and trying to, I mean, you're maybe not crying, but you're like, trying to kind of maintain this, and people will come up to you and be like, hey, like, I saw you, like, what have you been doing lately? And trying to have conversations. And I mean, I think it's a mix. I'm not like very like precious about it, but I think usually people get the idea, if they see you kind of off to a corner and like looking down and like trying to be in something, they're not going to bother you. Though, every set's different, but on this show they're pretty good, especially, I mean, a lot of people kind of have emotional scenes. Like I know Millie, I've seen her listen to music like while they're changing lights to kind of stay in this mental space. And yeah, everyone's different, but it is hard. That's one thing about the film world that's a little bit tricky, is if you when you have to stop and start, and if you're when you're having these emotional scenes, sometimes it's hard to just pick it right back up. But yeah, it's never been on this show. It's never been too much of a problem. But it is a really fun set. So if you do need that, you kind of have to like remove yourself from everybody else in a way.
One of the things that I think you do so well in all of your scenes is the way that you balance the emotional with the larger than life aspects. Like you're running through a hospital, running away from a demon, but yet there's still an emotionally grounded element to all of your performances and the way that you're connecting with other characters within the scene. Do you think about that approach? Because it's two very different types of acting within the same moment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, truly, I think, what's great about this show, or I think what a lot of us liked about the script, is that there are these characters that aren't just stock characters, maybe as like what their versions in the 80s would be, they're a little less grounded. But I think, that they've really given us a chance to round out these characters. But I personally, I in all of the things that I've done, you just try to look at just the human aspect. I mean, it is hard at some point to be like, okay, how would I feel if I was like, running away from a monster and like all these things have happened. But I think, you just try to make it as real in your head as you can for, what the situation allows. So there are moments that are very, if you let yourself get into it, like quite terrifying and exhausting. And, there's a fun element to it, but I do think we're all concerned with having these characters feel real in this world as much as we can.
Yeah. And do you think about the physicality of how Nancy carries herself? Because I feel like at least what comes across on screen is that as she's grown in confidence, we see like the way that you're walking on screen and carrying yourself really kind of adjust and change to your character. Is that something that you consciously map out, or does that really just come from responding to the script and the scenes?
I think a lot of it is just, the script and the scenes, and just having the knowledge of where she's been and where she's going and all the things that have happened. It does come quite naturally. Yeah, it is interesting to look back on like her very like the wardrobe. I do think helps quite a bit inform what her, because I think she's quite versatile in a way. She can really kind of adapt to situations. But I think, a lot of that comes from just where she's at in that particular season or in that particular scene. But I don't think I think about it too much. The other thing is sometimes her wardrobe does dictate how she moves. Like in the hospital scene, I was in these like sling back flats and just like running, and it was really not conducive. But then that just informs what's going on. You just roll with it, and you're just like, okay, well, this is what she has to work with. Yeah.
And I know that you've talked a lot in interviews about how much you admire Winona Ryder and her approach on set, and that she's someone that you feel like you can go to with questions. Are there any kind of specific things that you've looked to in terms of advice that you've been seeking from her since being on the show together?
Gosh, I think it's mostly what I feel like I gained, or like one of the most important things I feel like I've gained from watching her is just that sense of someone who speaks up on set and, is not so obedient to the project that she will ask questions. She'll ask so many questions. And, I think there's, as a younger actor, I think sometimes on set you feel like you can't stop the process because it's like time is money and everyone's stressed out and like you can't be the one to hold things up. But I think she's, watching her really kind of take ownership and like be very confident and her questioning things and getting clarification on things. And like as soon as she asks, you're like, yeah, that was a good question. Yeah, like yeah. What about that? That's, I think that's just getting more confident and sure of yourself and sure of what you need as an actor. And that's a learning process. I think and again, it's different for everybody, but it, she's definitely showed me that sort of strength on set is okay.
And then on the flip side, you have the younger cast who are in the show who you've really gotten to watch grow up. But also they've been your scene partners this entire time. And a lot of them came onto the show with it being one of their first parts or one of their first experiences on set. Do you see a shift now when you're in scenes with them and how they're approaching their craft and the things that they're learning?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's it's hard to just get over how fast they grow. They're so tall. Finn is so tall. It's really interesting because I have a younger sister as well, about their age, and so like watching her grow up. But it has also been there's like a sense of siblingness of like watching them, like, oh my gosh, how are you? Like, how old are you? You're driving? Like, no, like don't do that. I think they're all, they came in with that sort of innocence and just gameness of a young actor. They were all quite special in that way, and I think it is interesting to watch some sort of transition into this age of going through puberty and like just a time where you just naturally question yourself a lot more, and it's a time of growth and transformation, and I think they're doing such a good job of it, and it's funny to watch them come into themselves and how they relate to each other and how they get on in a scene. I think it's nice to see that they can still get serious when they need to get serious, but that they still have that youth about them. I think there's always a worry with kids that are growing up in the industry that it's like they're going to lose something about that. But I think a lot of them are, I've seen they goof off like kids their age do, and maybe in a different setting, and it's a very different life, but it's really nice to see that.
Yeah. And especially this season, because there were so many more large ensemble scenes for all of you. What did that kind of offer you? What did you really enjoy getting into with those large scenes altogether?
We just like hanging out with each other. It's always such a fun, they bring such an energy to it. I think when you get into the older, whether you're working with the teens or the adults, it's usually a little bit heavier, but whenever you're working with all the kids together, there's always the dialogue is always gonna be funny and witty, and there's serious things, but it's also fun. I think it's having younger people on set just brings that young, vibrant energy to whatever you're doing. So it's really nice. I think I definitely look forward to those scenes.
And you have the really lucky position of the fact that the Duffer Brothers have actually directed the majority of the episodes. But then when there's a different director stepping onto set, what's that process of building a rapport with them and starting to feel really comfortable, especially when they're giving you notes, but you've been playing this character for 3 seasons?
Yeah, no, it is. It's always, and every director is different. So it is kind of a game of figuring things out. I mean, we've had really great directors, Andrew Stanton and Udo, who did this season. Come in, and it's I think it's just about conversation and talking it out, and of course they're fans of the show, so they do get but it's interesting to hear what their take on your character is in a way, and you can kind of be like, okay, that's how you see it, that's interesting, and that can help inform. But I think it's more of that, just what sticking up for your character, and like this season we had Udo was so lovely, and she was this woman director who it's been mostly male directors for us, and she was very attuned to our questions about more of the emotional side of the dialogue, and just talking about where these characters are emotionally. She was very invested in that, and she really listened to her actors, and it was nice. But it's I think there is a certain world that this has to fit in, and everyone has to keep that in mind. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see the way that people interpret the show and to get fresh perspectives. But it is nice as well to have this team, the Duffers and Sean Levy, who've been there the whole time, because TV doesn't work that way very often. So it's been really nice to have that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about one of your other projects that you did recently with Yes, God, Yes, because that was such an interesting thing for you to do to begin with, making the short film as your career is taking off in film and television. So I'm really curious kind of what that felt like it was going to fulfill creatively for you.
Yeah, I just loved the script. That's usually what does it for me. Is Karen Main wrote it, and she worked on the writing side of Obvious Child, which was a film that I loved and I thought was so smart and funny. And it was just something about it spoke to me, and I thought it was interesting, and it was something that I hadn't done before, I hadn't read before. I think that's always the thing that gets my attention, is this is new, this is something else. It's not so foreign to me that I can't find myself in it, but I'm like, okay, let's go for it. It was fun, it was lovely. And then we made the feature length film as well, which was a very fun and funny experience. But yeah, it's
What was that process like, revisiting the same character when you were making the feature? Because essentially you're capturing the same essence that you did the first time, but you're adding so many additional layers to it.
Yeah, no, that was something I'd never done before. It is really going back and being okay, here's, and it's funny how, you get the essence of the character in the short film, and it wasn't hard to find that essence again, but it was really filling it out in my mind. And of course there's more scenes, so you get to see different aspects of the character and the story. But yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it. It's kind of backwards. But it was fun, and Karen was great, and she's a great writer director. But yeah, it was different.
Yeah. And one of the other female filmmakers that you worked with more recently as well was Leah Meyerhoff, who directed, I believe, in Unicorns. Yes. And I was interested because she runs Film Fatales, which is a great resource to many women in the entertainment industry. If there was anything that you really took away and learned from her as someone who's such an advocate for women across the entertainment industry.
I think Leah was such a force of nature. She really she had a vision, and we did a lot of talking. It was a really formative film for me, and kind of getting into knowing what film and filming. We filmed on film is like. But she kind of set this ground of really getting to understand the character, and it was a film that we had quite a bit. Even despite working on film, we had quite a bit of time to find things and explore emotions, and even improvise scenes, and just really play around in a way that I think is so lovely. And part of the reason I really love the craft is that play and that pretend and that exploration, which you don't always get with film, which is, often, again, it's the money and the time, and, it's sometimes you get 2 takes and that's it. And so that was really, it was a really beautiful experience. And she, and she guided that whole emotional world. And I think, again, every director is different, but I do find that women, all the women directors I've worked with, do listen and pay a lot of attention to the internal story and the emotional notes and what's going on. So yeah, that was a really formative experience for sure.
I wanted to jump into a couple of audience questions that we got. This first one from Xavier, who said, "What is the best part of filming this show?"
Such a hard question. Filming the show, just being with people that you like to be with, who are also creatives in this space, and getting to play and play pretend and dress up in a way. You know, I think at the end of the day, that's really what it is. And there's a lot of technicalities and business side of things, but like, it's the best job if that's what you want to do. Yeah, to be around all these people and just get to play. That's the best.
And this one is from Ariel, who said, "Do you get spooked out when filming the show?"
It is spooky. Not so much, which is good because I'm not like a horror movie person, so it's kind of nice to see the other side of it. They're like, oh, it's just a film. This is what they do. But there are moments of, like, I know the first season when we were filming in the woods, we were up in this place called Stone Mountain in Georgia, and when they would turn off all the work lights, and it's really dark. It is really dark, and and you have these, and you felt it was great. Again, that practical thing for actors, you're like, oh, this is so fun, but also it was terrifying because you really feel like you're in these dark woods alone. There are definitely moments, and if the hospital scene also was a bit creepy, but it's overall it's not too spooky, it's always a bit of a surprise when I watch it, and I'm like, oh, this is a little scary, but there are moments.
And what would you say is the aspect of playing this character and shooting the show that still challenges you the most in terms of your craft as an actor?
It is. It's a constant growth. It is that it's a challenge, but it's exciting and it's fun that you get to like these time jumps of like, okay, yeah, where have they been? How do I embody that? How do I show that? And I think there's an aspect about working in an ensemble, and again, not having so many scenes, is that the challenge is to kind of show, where they are, and as much as you can, you want to tell their whole story, you want to live the whole thing, but it's like, okay, but we have these moments that we can kind of live in, and they're important. And that's just part of film again in that world. And this season I got a perm, so that was that was a challenge. So yeah, that's not something I'd love to do again, but that informs the character. So.
Well, your performance is so fantastic. Can't wait to see more seasons. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And thank you to all of you.
Thanks, guys.